Father-son camping trip didn't go as planned. This story happened just this summer. I'm only now getting around to writing it down. I would consider myself an outdoorsman. I grew up in the sticks. I've spent a lot of my time wandering in and enjoying the backcountry. I'm older now and have settled down in the suburbs. Wife, 2 boys, a house, a dog, a desk job, the whole suburban shtick. I want opportunities for my kids that come from suburban life, but I also want them to grow up with the appreciation of the outdoors. So when my oldest son was big enough for his first solo father-son camping trip, I was excited. My wife and younger son stayed home for this midsummer trip. It was going to be a great bonding experience for me and my son because my son is just 5. I don't want to do anything too extreme on our first big solo camping trip. We needed a place that wasn't too deep into the Colorado Front Range, but still allowed for dispersed camping. I don't consider camping in RV parks or established campgrounds to be actual camping. You might as well be a motel watching TV. Camping, at most, is a tent, sleeping bag, and a fire. A dispersed camping area called Gordon Gulch west of Boulder caught my attention. I'd never been to this area before. There were no facilities and it was dispersed enough you could see or hear any other campers nearby. My son and I had a blast that day. We set up camp, collected firewood, went for a hike, saw a moose and a bobcat, tried a little fishing, and finally, as the sunlight faded, we returned to our campsite to light a fire. We had a traditional and nutritious camping meal, fire-burned hot dogs and marshmallows. It was a good day. Definitely a core memory for both my son and me. The perfect first camping experience for a preschooler, or so I thought. After all that fun, my son and I were exhausted. It was time for bed. The sound of an evening summer breeze through the pines is better than any commercial sleep aid. I don't even remember drifting off. It was a hard, dreamless sleep that only physical exertion can bring. One thing about my son, he inherited many things from me: hair, color, eye shape, disposition, and my unnaturally wide feet. But one peculiar thing he got from his mother was sleep talking. It's not unusual to hear him having full conversations in his sleep. It gets more pronounced when he's overly tired. I was capsulated out of the void of sleep. Not sure what aroused me. I sat up collecting myself. The world seemed to be at peace. It was quiet. Just me and the breeze through the treetops. I couldn't figure out what woke me so suddenly. The sound of my son laughing in his sleep cut through my groggy confusion. It was a deep belly laugh. Must be a fun dream, I thought hazily. Gently rocking him was enough to quiet him down. That must have been a good enough startled me, I determined. As I repositioned to fall back asleep, my son burst out laughing. I sighed and closed my eyes. He'll quiet down soon enough, I thought. He laughed again. This time his laugh was echoed by something outside our tent. I held my breath and listened, unsure of what I just heard. It wasn't an echo. There was something out there, and it was laughing in unison with my son. My grogginess vanished as the adrenaline began to pump. It couldn't be real. It had to be imagination. I sat up in my sleeping bag listening to the night. Hearing nothing after a minute, my muscles relaxed. I started to settle back down, must have been hearing things. I was tired after all. Checking the time, I saw it was 4 a.m. The sun would be up in a couple hours. My son laughed again, and again it was answered with laughter outside. I was now absolutely certain it was not an echo. As I tried to make sense of what was happening, the voice outside called out my son's name. My blood ran cold. That voice. It was so familiar. Then it clicked in my brain. It was the voice of my younger son. That wasn't at all possible. He was safe at home with my wife, miles and miles away. I could hear twigs crunching beyond our thin nylon tent walls. It was impossible to tell the distance from us, but there was something out there, circling us. Unprompted this time, it called out my son's name in the little toddler voice. My 5-year-old, still fast asleep, called out to his brother, asking him to play. The thing outside the tent laughed in reply and urged my son to come outside. That thing with my little son's voice sounded cold, hollow, dead. The floodgates of my adrenaline burst open. Cold sweat formed on my face. I was frightened out of my mind, but my primal caveman brain roared to life. I was in Papa Bear mode. Nothing was going to take or hurt my son. I was putting a stop to this. Whatever it was out there, I didn't care. You don't mess with my kids. Say what you will, but when you're camping miles from anything, it's not worth the risk of being unarmed. Wild animals, wild people, you have to be prepared. I almost always take a firearm with me when I'm camping. Pepper spray and bear bells are great, but nothing gets attention from a conscious threat faster than the sound of a chambering around. I spoke loudly into the night that I had a gun and was coming out. I hoped the fear in my voice was masked by my aggressiveness. The only reply was the breeze through the treetops. My son was still asleep. Kid's a hard sleeper, another trait from his mom. My wife and I have joked that he could sleep through a tornado. Stepping out into the cool summer night, a gun in one hand and a flashlight in another, I surveyed the campsite. The fire was down to embers. Our fishing gear was leaning against the pickup. The firewood was still neatly stacked. Nothing seemed out of place. Not wanting to stray far from the tent or my sleeping son, I sat down outside the entrance. I waited in the dark with the flashlight off. Not far into the trees, I heard a branch break, then another snap, this time closer. I stood up and flashed my light in the direction of the sound. Nothing was there. The voice called out, this time from behind, and this time focused towards me. "Daddy, Daddy." It was my youngest son's voice again, crying out for me from the dark forest. I threw the light beam in that direction. A pair of shimmering green eyes were illuminated by my flashlight. They were only 2 or so feet above the ground, the same height as a toddler. I took a small step forward it. I wanted to see more. I needed to see more. The eyes, unblinking, remained in place. Getting closer didn't help reveal this thing. It seemed to absorb the light from my flashlight, almost devouring it. I couldn't make out its size or shape or color. It seemed to swallow up all the light around it, save for its 2 shimmering green eyes. That thing laughed in its hollow toddler's voice, this time with malice and cruelty in it. The eyes never looked away from me, never blinking, focused only on me, like a predator before the pounce. Not wanting to give up on any ground to the predator, I stepped forward again. It didn't move. Not knowing what to do, I screamed as loud as I could. I waved my arms, trying futilely to shoo it away. The eyes shimmered, and as it stared back, the eyes shifted from green to amber. I watched as it began to rise up into the air. It was now apparent to me this thing had been crouching and was now standing up. I could only watch in silent terror as the eyes finally stopped rising, nearly 10 feet off the ground. The night air erupted with a deep growl. I could feel the vibrations in my gut. I couldn't see a mouth, but I could see or hear teeth snapping and gnashing. My son in the tent behind me began to scream. That was the only time the eyes lost focus on me and shifted towards the screams of my child. My only reaction was to fire my gun into the air. The eyes immediately vanished. My ears were ringing, but I could hear the growls turn to shrieks, followed by a cacophony of crashing branches and undergrowth. I stood there until I couldn't hear the shrieking anymore. It trailed off deep into the trees. I was left with only the sound of the breeze in the treetops and the quiet sobbing of my child. Twilight was beginning to illuminate the forest. Shaking and exhausted, I sat down in the dirt in front of the tent. I tried to collect myself. "Daddy, Daddy, where are you?" my 5-year-old shouted. That got me out of my daze. I picked myself up and went into the tent to retrieve him. Putting him in the truck, I locked the doors and wasted little time breaking down camp. We were out of that camp and back on the road by the time the sun broke over the horizon. I have no idea what is in those woods. I do plan to camp in that area again, albeit without my family, and definitely with some friends. I want to find out more about this thing. Thankfully, my son didn't seem fazed by anything that happened that night. He thinks I was chasing a bear away from camp, and maybe he's right. I hope he is anyways. My son can't wait to go on another camping trip, but truthfully, I'm thinking the next family camping trip might be at an RV park or even a motel. That's family camping, right? Ended with him in jail. This story is nowhere near as harrowing as some that I've read here, but when I found this subreddit, I knew I wanted to share this experience here. 3 years ago, I tried Tinder for the first time. I was 25 at the time, and while most 25-year-old women have dabbled on Tinder or the like, I hadn't been single since I was 17. I met my ex while I was in high school. 6 years later, we got married, had a baby. I was happy, but those last couple of years together, he had really begun to resent me and the family we had created together. I fought to keep our relationship together, but the abuse became more frequent and more intense. It got to the point where I took our baby and fled the house in the middle of the night. My mind was scarred and my heart was raw. It was a really difficult time in my life. A couple of months after I left, I had a new home, a new job, and a renewed sense of life. I was starting to open up and could feel myself healing. I was, however, lonely. I was adjusting to shared custody and spent my weekends alone. I didn't want to jump into any relationship, but I did want to experience some of the things my 8-year-old relationship hadn't allowed me. Joining Tinder felt fun. It was new and scary, and after so much trauma, it felt nice to have so much positive attention. My self-worth was low, so the cheap compliments and instant gratification of the app felt incredible. Who am I to deserve their attention? Why would they choose to speak to me of all women? Not my healthiest coping mechanism, but I wanted to feel desirable. That's when I met Derek. Derek was an unassuming average guy. He was cute enough, but not so attractive that I felt self-conscious. Derek and I shared a few interests, craft beer, hiking, and he had a sense of humor that I liked. We agreed to meet up at a local restaurant. I was so nervous. My first date in 8 years. I donned my cutest dress, got made up, and headed out. As I waited in the restaurant, my palms were sweaty, my heart was fluttering, and I began to question myself. He arrived and everything was awkward at first. We ordered our first beers and started to break the ice. As soon as the buzz of the alcohol began to hit, our conversation took off. We had relaxed in each other's company, and the rest of the day went smoothly. We joked about karaoke across town. He laughed about how we didn't like karaoke. I am a huge fan of karaoke. While no superstar, I've spent a good amount of time in choirs and can carry a tune well enough. One of my favorite rowdy weekend activities is going to that bar and busting out some songs with the sweet taste of gin on my tongue. I convinced him to go with me, and we left the restaurant. We sang into the night, taking shots, flirting, laughing. We ended the night in his truck, clumsily fumbling with each other's buttons and zippers, hearts racing with excitement. This had been what I needed. We texted back and forth more often, and soon we were talking about another date. I'd enjoyed our time together, and liked that I didn't feel a deep connection with him. It was fun, and that was it. Because my heart wasn't tangled up in feelings, he felt safe. We decided for our second date that we would go tubing down a river that runs through our town. We had parked his orange truck at the end of the tubing run and took the tubes in my truck upriver. We agreed that he would zip my truck key with his into a pocket on his shorts and that he would drop me off at my truck afterwards. Bright summer heat warmed our skin and the water felt crisp and fresh on our toes. The afternoon slipped past as we floated down the river. When we reached the bottom, we deflated our tubes and headed back to my truck. Only when Derek reached into his pocket, his face sank. He looked at me and said, "Your key is gone." I laughed. Surely he was joking. He insisted this wasn't a joke. Gravity pulled at my stomach and I began to panic. This was the only copy of my truck key, and I had taken it on the river. I felt foolish and worried about how to get a new key if we couldn't find it. The river was long. We had been tubing for hours. We'd stopped at several places to swim. He offered to drive me at home, and I accepted. During the drive, we made a plan to meet up the next day to search for my key at some of the stops we had made. We spent the next afternoon combing our swimming holes for my key. Up and down we swam, with very little hope that we would ever see my keys. We had to try, though, and we kept at it. From one spot to another, we drove, we swam, and we moved on. At the very last place, we checked. As the light of afternoon faded into a hazy orange, something caught his eye. Underwater, near the shore, were my keys. We were elated and could not believe our luck. To celebrate, we went back to his place for some drinks. He drove me down a long wooded driveway, and at the very end was a shaded trailer. He told me that he was only renting a room here from an elderly couple, but they were on vacation, so we would be alone. We walked over the creaking porch and entered the trailer. Inside, I could see the kitchen was messy. Not just a couple of dishes, but every surface was covered with mess. He ushered me away to show me his room. It was small and not very clean either. Dirty clothes, mattress on the floor, a Rubbermaid bin with some snacks like Doritos and cheap warm beer. We had sex, the yellowed light of the trailer accentuating the stains on the walls. Afterwards, the spark of fun I had felt when we first met had withered, and I felt gross. I decided that it would be a very last date. A week passed and we hardly texted. Our brief fling was ending, and I didn't expect to see him again. My mind moved on to other things. The coming weekend, my friends were coming to town, and I was excited. We made plans to go to karaoke together on Saturday night. When the day arrived, I was surprised to see a text from Derek on my phone. "Are you going to karaoke tonight?" it read. I responded that I was, and he texted back that he would be there. "I thought you didn't like karaoke," I asked him. And he said that he had been invited by a girl he worked with, and thought he should give me a heads up that he would be with a date, in case I was there. I thanked him for taking the time to let me know, reassured him that I wouldn't be bothered at all, and said that I hoped he had a great date. Around 9:30 that night, my friends and I arrived at the bar. The dim lights and reflective foil stars, an all too familiar scene. We got our drinks and picked a booth with a good view of the stage. I had a strange sensation, like someone was watching me. I turned my head, scanning the bar, and our eyes locked. Derek and his date were a few booths away, and he was watching us. He waved zealously with a big smile. His date turned around to look, and I managed an awkward wave. I was absolutely fine with him being on a date, but I didn't want to advertise that we knew each other or make his date uncomfortable. My friends were all aware of the time we had spent together, my thoughts on the experience, and the text he had sent me earlier. We were all thinking it was a bit odd that he would go out of his way to interact with me in front of his date, but no harm, no foul. He was just being friendly. The evening carried on, and we had a great time, basking in the atmosphere, drinking in the songs and laughter. A couple of hours in, we were sitting in our booth, when Derek stumbled over to our table with his date. He introduced her as Kate, and plopped down beside me, pulling her down into our booth next to him. The strong smell of alcohol oozed off of them, and I could see they were hammered. It became obvious they had both had too much to drink, their eyes glazed and words slurred. Kate seemed really nice, despite her state, and she launched into a drunk story to the whole table. My friends and I were fairly uncomfortable, and were unsure what was going on. Under the table, I felt Derek's sticky hand slide onto my thigh. His date was right there, and I was stunned. Without making a scene, I subtly removed his hand and excused myself to get another drink. As I walked across the room, I could feel his eyes raking my back, and sure enough, when I turned around, he was watching. When I got back, Kate was slurring that her taxi had come. She and Derek exchanged a sloppy kiss and goodnights, and then it was just us and Derek. Derek's mood shifted after that. He was drunkenly unaware of how uncomfortable the table was, and we could tell he was brooding about his date having left without him. Derek turned his attention to me. He slung his heavy arm over my shoulder and leaned in, his sour breath managing to come together to form clumsy sentences. "You're so cute. I love your laugh." I was rigid and just wanted him to leave. When he got up to get another beer, my friends and I spoke about the situation. One of them remarking, "You know you can do better than this, right?" I said yes. As casual as this had been, I made a mistake. We came to the conclusion it would be best if we ended the night early, as we didn't see him leaving me alone. As a backup plan, if anything went south, we agreed that the girls would go to the bathroom and leave out the back door, while our male friend would distract him and slip away. Derek arrived back at the table, sloshing his beer onto his front. He slurred, "Where are we going next?" I hesitated, but my friend told him that we would be going all home. Derek said he would walk us there, and we politely declined. He was leaning up against a wall and barely holding himself up at this point. We asked him how he was going to get home, and if we could call him a cab. Derek drunkenly pouted that he could just come to my place with me. Trying to shut him down as politely as I could, I told him that my child was there with a sitter, so I couldn't have him over. He didn't need to know that wasn't true. He refused a taxi and said he would just sleep in his truck. Since his eyelids were drooping and looking at the rest of his state, it seemed reasonable that he would be able to fall asleep in a truck, and we accepted that answer. As we started to leave, he stumbled after us. We stopped and reminded him that we were all going to bed. He argued again that he should just come with me. My friends and I locked eyes. It was time to engage our backup plan. The two girls and I excused ourselves to the washroom while our friend distracted him. Slipping out the back door, the cool rush of night air hit us, and we hurried to the path that led to their hotel. Our friend caught up with us and said he had left Derek behind at the bar. We were all relieved to be out of there and started the walk back to our hotel. One of the girls was sober and offered to drive me home when we got to the hotel, and I accepted. A few minutes down the path, my phone began to ring. I looked at the caller ID and felt my stomach drop. It was Derek. I turned the volume down and let it ring, and to my surprise, he left a voicemail. I turned on the speaker and played it out loud. Derek's voice sounded confused as his words melted together into the phone. "Where are you guys? I thought we were all going to hang out. I don't understand." We all glad we had left and agreed that this had been wild. That's when the phone rang again. Another voicemail popped up on my screen. In the dim light of the trail, I played the new voicemail aloud once more. His drunken speech was more intense this time, as he launched into how he didn't understand why I had left. I had hurt his feelings, and he was in love with me. The tone of his voice shook me when I heard him say, "I love you." There was something dark and heavy about it that left me feeling unsettled. We were all creeped out, but happy to see the bright sign of the hotel ahead. We traveled the carpeted hallway to their room so my friend could grab her keys to take me home. As we entered the room, my phone began to ring again. This time, the voicemail sent shockwaves of fear through my body. Derek's voice had taken on an edge, as he repeated that he loved me, but he was actually really fucking mad at me for leaving him at the bar. He went on about how I could do that to him. He didn't know what he was going to do. His voice shook with anger, as he stumbled over himself expressing how I had betrayed him. The last thing he said before hanging up echoed in the hotel room. "You know, I'm really starting to fucking hate you." This guy was unhinged and I was terrified. I was grateful this side of Derek hadn't shown up when we were alone in his secluded trailer. My friends gave me a hug and told me to call them if I needed anything, and to keep them updated. My friend took me home, and as I unlocked the door and stepped into the comfort of home, I felt exhausted. It had not been the night out I expected, and Derek's erratic behavior had really freaked me out. Fresh out of an abusive relationship, his actions at the bar, then the voicemails rang some all too familiar bells. That's when I saw the headlights. It was very late for anyone to be driving down my street. I peeked through the curtain, my blood ran cold and I trembled. Sitting in the cab of his orange truck was Derek. Mind racing, I panicked. This dude could barely hold himself up when we left. He was blackout obliterated. How did he drive across town to my house? How did he find me? I immediately remembered the other week when he dropped me off after his key was lost. How could I have been so stupid? I barely knew him. We had only met 3 times. Derek's face was stony and etched with rage. As he sat in the dark cab staring at my house, he wasn't getting out. He was just staring, while I was on my hands and knees peeking out the window. All the lights were off inside. I was sure he couldn't see me. Then, the screen on my phone lit up. He was calling me again. I quickly hid it so he couldn't see the light. Hand shaking, I played the voicemail as quietly as I could. Derek only said one thing this time, a phrase that sent terror shooting down my spine. In a drunken sing-song voice, almost taunting me, he quietly said, "Where are you?" Click. I was terrified. Somehow I hadn't really considered I could be in danger and chalked up all the fear to my past experiences. Surely I was overreacting and it was my fault for reading too much into this. I shouldn't be this scared and I don't want to make a scene. That last voicemail sealed the deal. I figured even if I was overreacting, at the very least he was a drunk driver. I called 911 and the dispatcher said someone would be there in a couple of minutes. As I peeked out of the window, I saw him get out of his truck. He was done waiting. His heavy feet stumbled as they hit the pavement, and he looked around. Derek's voice cut through the night. He started yelling my name. The wild anger in his voice was tangible through the walls, and he just yelled into the street, "Where are you?" Derek started to stumble towards my house when the flashing red and blue lights cascaded down the street, lighting up his face and highlighting every ounce of rage carved into his features. 2 police cars pulled up, and the officers got out. I was still peeking out from inside my dark house and couldn't hear much of what was happening. I watched them breathalyze him, which he obviously failed. The officers inspected his truck. They all spoke for a while, and one of the officers came to my door. I spoke to him about what had happened, and he was very empathetic. He said as unsettling as his actions had been, there wasn't much they could do without a direct threat. The officers let me know that they'd be taking him in for the night and he could be charged with drunk driving, but that he would be out tomorrow, and to make sure I kept my doors locked and stayed safe. The tow truck came to remove his orange truck from the road, and I could see him arguing. The officers weren't having any of it, and they turned him around to cuff him. As the handcuffs locked around his wrist, he yelled out one last time, looking directly at the window. I was peeking out. "I know you're in there, my name. Why don't you come out to say goodnight?" As quickly as my street had filled up, it was empty. The quiet shadows of the late night swallowing the earlier chaos into nothingness. Derek texted me the next afternoon. "I'm very sorry about last night. I was in a bad place." I responded that his actions were unacceptable, and how dare he show up at my house my child lives at, and that I'd prefer not to hear from him again. He apologized one last time, and I haven't heard from him since. Over the next few months, I would see him on a bike going to and from his workplace, so I know he lost his license. I was always wary that we would bump into each other, which thankfully never happened. I can only imagine how much angrier he was after that night lost him his license. I found out that he moved to mainland a while back, which was quite a relief for me, and I no longer feel as on edge around town. So, Derek, let's never meet again. Fujitajiken 001. Sometimes you come across a Reddit comment that just sticks with you. It's not loud, it's not dramatic, but it just feels off. The one we are going to be talking about now was just a random comment, but the second you read it, you could tell something was wrong. And if you know anything about factories in Thailand, then you know exactly how bad it could get. Hundreds of factories across Southeast Asia exploit workers and keep them trapped. They work long hours with little to no pay. Most of the time, their passports are confiscated and they are kept locked. It's modern-day slavery. According to a 2022 report by the UN's International Labor Organization, over 50 million people globally are victims of forced labor. Many of them are hidden behind the walls of factories. Thailand is one of the hotspots for this crime, especially for migrant workers who are easily silenced and easily replaced. It all started when a user clicked on a random promoted post and spotted a strange, desperate-sounding comment. He didn't just scroll past, and it's good that he didn't, because what he found next was a very real cry for help. The post he wrote read, "Found a cry for help on Reddit from Thai factory worker. I clicked on a niche promoted post on my Reddit feed and saw this comment by Reddit user Fujitajiken 001. I googled Fujita Giken, and it's a seemingly low-profile factory in Thailand. Thai factories have a notorious history of essentially holding their workers hostage as slaves in disgusting conditions. I think there's a good chance this is real and that there are a number of people who need real and immediate help. I have no internet at home right now and don't have the means to find out who to contact to have this investigated. If anyone who has the ability to find relevant sources could look into this and point appropriate parties in the right direction, they will have my utmost gratitude. I know there's a possibility it might be a sick prank, but the name is awfully specific and I imagine near impossible to coax from Google. I'm going to have trouble sleeping tonight." All of this happened around 8 years ago, but the actual comment that made people worry was simple but chilling. "I face too serious problem of human rights at Fuji Takin, Thailand. Please help me." And it wasn't just that. If we head over to his account, we can see that he didn't just post one comment. There were around 40 comments that he posted, saying the same thing. "I face too serious problem of human rights at Fuji Tajiken, Thailand. Please help me." Now the question is, why would someone post the same comment over 40 times in different subreddits? People did think he might have been trolling, but keep in mind, this happened 8 years ago. At that time, Thailand was in the middle of a major political crisis, and everything seemed to be falling apart, so we can't say for sure what the real story was. The user's case eventually faded into the Reddit abyss, but some of his 40 posts still linger, serving as a grim reminder that the world can be a really dark place. RW Bingham. This next post comes from, "I found my brother-in-law's Reddit account and I'm genuinely terrified for my family." And the post reads as follows. "First and foremost, I will not be sharing brother-in-law's username. I know this will cause most people to call this post fake, but his account has a lot of private information about many members of my family. including what are essentially dox bins and other private info. He does not know I know about this account, and I don't want anyone to go to his account to leave comments or message him. I'm 21 female. My sister, Jane, who's 28 female, has been with John, who's 27 male, for 2 years. I found his account totally randomly. I googled his name as he's a journalist and found a Reddit account with the same name. Think John _ Doe _ is dead 1997. I clicked on it and found tons of Reddit posts ranting about his girlfriend's family, mainly her little sister. At first, I thought I just came across a random, disturbed individual, but clicking on the posts revealed much more. Both my sister and I have unique names. Not super rare, but uncommon enough that they're noticeable in a list of names, and neither of us have met anyone with the same names as us. Plus, our surnames aren't super basic either. Think Aura Fernsberry. Fake, but similar name to myself. He also mentions enough personal details for it to be undeniably him. I wouldn't be writing this unless I was 99% sure. The posts are all either posted to vent/rant subs or straight to his Reddit page. They all have like 0 to 3 upvotes and a few comments spread across from what I can tell to be 100 posts. They're all mostly complaining about Jane, me, or our mother. The most concerning post is about me though. I have a varied past with men, mainly influenced by SA. I'm in therapy, but it has made me a lot more wary among men I do/don't know. This apparently enrages John. In this post, he details out how he plans to offer to drive me home next I visit them. But instead of taking me home, he'll detour and take the scenic route through the country lanes in our town. He says he wants to make me afraid enough that I'll do something to her. But after 15 or so minutes, he'll turn around and drive me home, therefore showing me that not all men are creeps and want to hurt her. His logic seems to be that since he acted weird but didn't hurt me, it should click in her brain that not all men are bad. The post is very long, like scrolling down for 15 seconds long, but he rants about how it's unfair that I flinch around him when he makes big gestures or yells at the TV, because he'd never do anything. He says he can fix me more than my therapist. A lot of the post is weird incel-y talking points. I was bawling reading the whole thing. There's one comment telling him to get help, but John just responds, "I don't need help. She does." His comment history is also concerning. A lot of weird incel talking points, which doesn't make sense as he has a girlfriend. I'm not super versed in incel ideology. A lot of stuff about SA, women's roles in relationships/society, other races, ethnicities, religions, etc. I'm terrified of John. We weren't close before, but we didn't hate each other. To me, he was just a grown man with a vastly different interests, and we would never mesh cleanly. Now, I don't know what to think. My mind is frazzled. I'm going to tell my sister, but I don't know how. I have screenshots of everything, links, etc. I just don't know how to lay it all out. Also, I need coping mechanisms. I'm in a constant state of pre-panic attack. I can feel it in my chest, but it's not tipping over into a full panic attack, which is making me genuinely crazy. I'm sorry for the long post, but thanks in advance. Edit. As of 2 hours ago, I made my mom and uncle aware of what I found. Every screenshot, screen recording, and link. My sister is currently on a work trip, so we're waiting for her to come back in 2 days. His account is still up as of 20 minutes ago. Thanks for all your advice. Mom, uncle, and I are figuring out the best way to tell my sister. And now let's get into some comments. Someone says, "Ooh, I did not want to be the first comment here. This is so much to unpack. Do you think your sister will believe you? Talk to your parents/family first. They should hear about your fear before they hear from your sister that you're talking shit. Is your sister safe?" I have no clue what else to say Other than, I'm going to come back in case anyone has coping mechanisms for your pre-panic attack thing. I'm experiencing the same thing, and it's also driving me insane. Pre-panic attack is a good way to describe it. I've been struggling with it for years, and there's no medical term for it, so thanks for giving it a name. And then the OP responds saying, is your sister safe? This is why I want to tell her ASAP, because I don't know. Not anymore anyway. They seem happy together, but now I'm rethinking everything. Thanks for your advice. Another commenter says, why is he so obsessed with you? He has a girlfriend and prefers to vent about you. Are you that close to him? He is not in a normal place mentally. Show the text to your sister and mother. He can be abusive to your sister. And then the OP responds saying, we're not close. I live closer to my sister than any of our family, so I see her/him fairly often. But I never go to see him. He's usually just there, which is fair because it's his home too. But I never go with the reason of hanging out with John. Just my sister. We're not close. We don't have much in common, but get along well enough. I had no interest in being his friend or anything before for many obvious reasons, but especially now. I have no idea why he's so obsessed with me. It's freaking me out. Another commenter says, how does he know so much about your trauma? Who told him? That's a very important question to solve beforehand. And then the OP responds saying, last year when I was SA'd by my now ex, I ended up calling John to pick me up because my ex lived in a different city and was supposed to give me a ride back. I had a breakdown in his car and told him what happened. I hadn't intended to tell anybody about what happened, but I couldn't keep it in. Also, my sister and I both witnessed abuse from our father, which I'm sure she told John about, and he correctly assumed I was also inflicted. Another commenter says, does this mean your parents aren't safe advocates in this situation? And then the OP responds saying, no, not at all. I'm planning on telling my mom too. The no telling anyone about the SA comment was more of a spur of the moment traumatized and mortified 19-year-old. And then the OP responds to a troll saying, but I don't think all men are evil. John literally just projected that onto me. He wrote that assumption in a post where he detailed graphically how he wanted to make me fear for my own safety to fix me because he's upset I have trauma and CPTSD, and I'm somehow as creepy as he is and terrifying. I would love a deep dive into how you can go to that conclusion, because reading some Reddit posts don't feel the same as what John is doing/planning to do. And then the OP gives us an update about 2 months later, and the update reads as follows. As I mentioned in my last post, I had made my mom and uncle aware of the situation. We all agreed that waiting for Jane to come back home from a work trip to tell her was the best course of action. When she got back, we sat her down to explain everything. I showed her the screenshots, the posts, and walked her through everything John had said. She was quiet at first, just reading through the messages with this shocked look on her face. She started accusing me of overreacting or somehow getting the situation wrong. She said that maybe John was just venting and didn't actually mean any of it. She also suggested that I might be reading too much into his post because of my past trauma. My mom and uncle tried to step in and back me up, but Jane wasn't having it. She kept saying that we were blowing things out of proportion and that we didn't understand John like she does. At this point, she was getting really upset and we were all talking over each other. Then Jane said that I've always been distant from John and that maybe he felt uncomfortable around me because of how I act. At that point, I was done. I made it clear that if she decided to stay with him, I would have to limit my contact with both of them. My mom and uncle backed me up on this, and we all said that we couldn't trust John to be a part of our lives anymore after seeing what he wrote. Jane stormed out of the house after that. She's barely spoken to me since, except for a couple of cold texts saying she needs to process the situation. On Monday, it's Wednesday tonight, Jane showed up to my door, completely unannounced. She looked like she hadn't slept, and the first thing she did was apologize. I was shocked because I wasn't expecting her to come around so quickly. She told me that after she left, she couldn't stop thinking about the posts. and she started going back over everything in her head. She said she told John about the situation, and when I went to check, all his stuff had been deleted. This annoyed me and my mom, who was on the phone, as we told Jane to keep quiet for safety reasons. Luckily, I have all the evidence saved. She said that John had blocked me on everything to preserve his career, and that he was super pissed off with me for stalking him. He even told my sister that the account wasn't him, rather someone at work who hates him. I obviously don't know everything that happened between them, but it's caused a rift between them. I've moved in with my uncle for the time being, as I was afraid of John showing up on these first few nights. We looked into legal options about the post, but found nothing that would help us. My uncle said he's going to help me get in contact with his work, but I'm scared of John's reaction if I did that. As of current, my sister isn't totally settled on leaving John, so I've gone LC with her. She said her reasons for staying with John is because she just can't see John acting like this. Luckily, I have friends and family who are on my side. I'm sorry this update is kind of bleak. And that is the last update we have received from the OP, and it's been about a year since we've heard from her, so I think this is going to be the last update on the situation. This all takes place in the closing days of summer 2021. I was a freshman at the University of Maine, having just moved in 2 days prior. We had a run-of-the-mill freshman orientation located in all of our lecture halls, exploring the student union and some small icebreaker activities with all our floor mates. I'm a very outgoing person, so I'd amassed a small group of friends through these events. I'm going to change names as you never know who's listening. My roommate, we'll call Charlie, was a really down-to-earth guy. He played a lot of League and didn't get out a ton, but we all got along really well. A girl we'll call Olivia, whom I'd met in one of the freshman Facebook chats. She was kind of alternative. She had purple hair and inviting green eyes. We had been flirting online prior to getting to school, and were hitting it off in person. Finally, there was Cassie. She was a girl from Olivia's high school who wound up going to University of Maine as well. Olivia didn't know her super well, but she was a friendly face in a new environment. She was sweet, and we were hoping to try and set her up with Charlie. We had just attended an end of orientation barbecue. The sun hung low in the sky, so we ate hamburgers and hot dogs provided by the school. We finished up and got to leave. I followed close in Olivia's footsteps as we began our walk back to our dorms. She twirled in front of me, throwing her arms back and letting the dying sunlight cascade over her. It's such a beautiful day. How do we feel about an evening stroll? She mused to the group. Charlie looked a little apprehensive, but I gave him the silent look, hoping he'd get the message. We can stop and grab a joint from my car along the way, I said, attempting to sell him on the excursion. He caved, and we walked to the student parking lot outside of the astronomy center. I grabbed a little tube from my car, and we hit the paved bike path into the woods, knowing we had to get off school grounds to avoid a felony. We decided to explore a little further than we had previously. The dog days of summer in Maine are one of the most beautiful times to be in our small state. I felt a sense of gratitude for the privilege to be able to spend the dying light of summer in such a beautiful place. Maine is densely forested and painted with beautiful lakes. The days are filled with a dry haze of heat with a periodic gust of wind to remind you of autumn lurking close by. The trees created a canopy over the path as we walked, obscuring the little sunlight left. We turned down an unpaved portion of the trail that led out into a massive field of tall grass. We were maybe half a mile from the parking lot, but the lack of lighting made it feel like we were in the middle of the woods. The gentle breeze swept across the grass as we picked a trim spot to sit down on. We lit up the joint and laid back to admire the vast night sky. It's rare to get moments without any light pollution, and this was breathtaking. We smoked and talked about our summers in our hometowns, our upcoming classes, and what clubs we were looking forward to joining. It was a beautiful moment between new friends. Out of nowhere, I was struck with an intense, gnawing anxiety. This isn't out of the ordinary for me, so I just tried to shake it off. Olivia's pinky brushed over mine as she looked up at me, our first deliberate touch sending another flurry of electricity through my nervous system. Even her small touch of reassurance wasn't enough to shake me out of this deep sense of impending doom. It sounds cheesy, but I got the powerful sensation of being watched. I had never felt anything like it, and I still haven't to this day. It was a primal fear, the ape-brained feeling that something predatory knows where I am. Not wanting to alarm anyone, I said that I think it's time we get back to campus. We stand, and as we're getting ready to walk away, Charlie says, "Do you guys see that? The light?" As he points down the trail, hugging the outside of the tall grass, and sure enough, I turn to see one circular pale blue light just within the far tree line. The light was completely stationary, as if someone had put a staged light in the middle of the woods. It was about 150 to 200 yards away, so it was hard to make out any distinguishing features about what was causing the light, but in my conjunction with my anxiety, I didn't feel the need to find out. I mentally reassure myself that it's probably just someone out for a walk with a flashlight, but definitely put a little more pep in my step as we turned to leave. We're about halfway down the paved portion of the bike trail when I hear Olivia gasp. "I don't have my Maine card. I needed to get back in my room," she mutters. Having absolutely zero desire to turn around, I ask if her roommate could let her in, but she has a single and the office to get a replacement is long closed. Every fiber of my being was screaming at me to get out of the woods, but wanting to help the girl I was developing feelings for, I agreed to help her look for it. Olivia and I turned back to go to our smoke spot while Colin and Cassie scanned the path with their flashlights. Mentally kicking myself for doing exactly what gets people killed in horror movies, we get back to the spot. Fortunately, Olivia's Maine card is resting right in the grass. She bends down to pick it up as I scan down the trail. Sure enough, the light is there, and of course, it's closer. About 50 yards from us, emanating from the tall grass, I have full-blown fight-or-flight response. I'd like to say I jumped into action and got us out of there, but I completely froze up. Fear racked my body, completely stalling my thoughts and freezing my body in place. Olivia follows my gaze as she sees it too. She lets out a startled gasp but stifles it with her hand. She grabs my hand with her opposite and yanks me back towards the parking lot, shaking me out of the trance. The last thing I want to do is turn my back to it, but I have to so I don't trip as we half walk, half run down the trail. We hit the tree line and I glance over my shoulder to see that the light is gone. Not sure whether to feel better or worse. I focus on putting one foot in front of the other. As I hit a rhythm, it feels like the air around me flexes, tuning my ears to my surroundings. I clear as day hear my sister's voice over my left shoulder. My sister lives in DC, hundreds of miles away, but it was absolutely her voice. I don't remember the words spoken. It sounded like a whisper, too close to my ear, but I could unmistakably make out my sister's voice. She's been my best friend my entire life, and I know it anywhere. This stirred me into an all-out sprint. Still holding Olivia's hand, I pull her full speed down the trail and out into the parking lot. We scare Charlie and Cassie as we come bounding out of the woods. They frantically asked us what was wrong, but Olivia and I had no answer. We just looked at each other as we gasped for breath, no words coming to mind for what we just experienced. Slightly reassured by the streetlights, we walked the girls back to the dorm, eager to get as far away from the woods as possible. Clearly rattled from the experience, Olivia shakily opens her door and gives me a long stare before ducking inside. Charlie and I get home, and I collapse on my bed and I struggle to fall asleep, but eventually drift off. Nobody ever spoke of it, and it eventually faded to the back of my mind in a scary experience. Olivia and I went on to date for a few months, never speaking about it more than just, that was weird and scary. We wound up breaking up in February, nothing hostile, just different people. We met up in my car to have one last closure talk in the same parking lot from months earlier. As the conversation comes to a close, she asked if she can ask me a dumb question. Thinking it's about our relationship, I say, of course. But she quietly asks, "That night in the woods, did you hear anything?" I tell her about my sister's voice and I can see her grow pale. She confided in me that she heard her grandfather's voice whisper, "I'm always close by," in her ear. Honestly, I have no idea what to make of this. I'm not a particularly spiritual person and prefer to find rational explanations, but I've struggled with this one. One thought I had was being paranoid because of the weed, but I smoked heavily at the time and still do, and I've never experienced any paranoid/psychoactive effects. The town of Orono and school campus does sit on the indigenous homelands of the Wabanaki people. Like I said, I'm not spiritual, but if anyone knows anything about the woods here, it's the people who've been living in them for thousands of years. I don't know if they have any similar legends of skinwalkers or wendigos. I don't necessarily allocate this to an encounter with a spirit such as those, but some of my experience does line up with those tales. I've never heard them described as lights, but the voices we heard were very unnerving. I've since consumed a lot of media surrounding those pieces of folklore, and that's part of why I wanted to share my experience. Believe me, or don't, this experience still chills me to the core to this day. Thanks for reading. Hey Snook, I've been watching. Confession. I'm losing hope and want to die. Hey Snook, I'm not a longtime viewer of yours. In fact, I've only discovered your channel pretty recently. However, watching your videos has always left me astounded. I could definitely see how much work and time goes into this, and I definitely admire you for it. My confession is simple. I am extremely depressed and am losing hope that things will get better. I still live with my father, who is a covert narcissist, the type who always goes out of his way to impress his friends, financially and such, while his family suffers. He has isolated us from everyone, is financially irresponsible and abusive, and is verbally, emotionally, and sometimes even physically abusive. I have never been allowed to work, which has been a major issue, as now that I try to apply for remote jobs, I am constantly rejected as I have no experience. I've been riddled with debt, to which I have no income to pay it off, nor could I since my father is in control of the finances and usually spends it all. We live under the not best conditions, and it's caused health issues for my siblings. I'm tired. All I want is to get away from my father and give my siblings a good life, but I'm tired of holding on to hope that things will get better. I want to die, but can't because I don't want to leave my siblings at his mercy. Plus, if I fail, that's even more debt I'd be saddled with. Watching your siblings almost die due to the conditions of the house we've lived in has taken a toll on me. I tried everything, reached out to so many organizations, but haven't received help. I truly don't know what to do or how to continue on like this. I guess this is my confession. I'm sorry if it seems like I was rambling. Thank you for listening and providing a space for me to get some of this out. I'm from a remote village in northern Alaska, and I've seen some things. As the title says, I'm from a remote Alaska. I grew up with stories of old creatures and legends, but I've also seen some things. I'm typing this on my phone, so I apologize if I misspell anything, but hear what I have to say. My village is roughly 250 miles northwest of Fairbanks, Alaska. It is situated in the mountains and surrounded by the national park, so there's already suspicion of supernatural entities there. Growing up, I was always told about the Inuthigarak, or the little people. These smaller humanoids are of smaller proportions, and they are strong, fast, very smart, and they even speak an old dialect of the language of the area they live in. At a distant point in time, we lived alongside them and hunted for them, with them out in the Nua or tundra. But as one family was visiting another, a human's dog ate the little one's child, and so became a grudge that some still hold today towards humans. There are stories of people being lured away from their homes just to be tricked and left out in the middle of nowhere. There are also stories of them helping us humans in times of need. Like from my village, caribou were herded by a small blurry thing towards a group of people, according to the story from the 60s or 70s, and there was a good harvest of animals that fall. There are also stories of the Inukabak, or big person, sometimes called Bigfoot by people, even though they don't always look like an ape-like human. The old stories talk of giants that roamed the land in silence or in anger. One story even tells of a cannibalistic one out west near Nome or Kotzebue. Back home, they come out and around when the caribou do, like the Inukorat, and will either be mischievous or just watchful of humans. In my personal experiences, I've seen the little ones and the big ones. They both can resemble humans or just a blur on the land. I believe they're part of another world or dimension, and that's why they cannot always be seen, but hey, we may never know. Alright guys, here's one that happened a few summers ago. Live out near Texarkana. Parents have farm with a few cows, horses, and too many chickens to count. Farm sits on the boundary between woods and plains. Trees are sparse but thicken up like crazy towards the back of our property. Parents gone to Corpus Christi for vacation, so of course I have to take care of all the animals. Tack the heat wave passing through on that, and it's basically constant care making sure they're all watered. Closest friends are out of town for the week. Farm is about 20 miles outside of city limits, so I can rule getting my dick wet out of the roster of activities. Split time up between feeding chickens and animals and sighting in my new SIG 556 I got for graduation. Wake up one morning. One of our older horses had died. She had plenty of water, but the heat must have been too much for her. Poor girl. I phoned Dad. He tells me to go to neighbor Frank a few miles down the road. He has a backhoe. Go to Frank, tell him my situation. He follows me back home with the thing and fills me in on how to operate. Not too different from a tractor, so I'm set. Tells me he'll be back the next morning for the backhoe. Set to work digging Empress's grave. Fill it in, offer a moment of silence, shed a manly tear. Turn the backhoe back on and chug-a-lug to the back of the property. 30 plus acres and not a single berm for shooting. Madness. Don't bother telling parents because they wouldn't give a fuck. Start digging a berm. Leave the trench for aside. Suddenly smell this dank, shitty odor. Panic and think I hit a sewer line. Hop down out of cab and search the trench for busted pipe, none to be found. Sudden feel uneasy, feeling of being unwatched. Scan tree line and surrounding field. Zip. Chalk it up to dead horse and residual guilt, but still tactically back to backhoe. Glad I left it running. Chug-a-lug back to farm. Turn it off and head inside. Get up early next morning, make a big country breakfast, and go out to feed some motherfucking critters. Go out to do the horse's routine, but with one last chunk of hay on the wheelbarrow. Sad face. Suddenly waft a most unpleasant vapor. That smelly smell from yesterday mixed with rot. Head out on a hunch to where I buried Empress. Stagger and nearly puke. The grave's been robbed. Her head had been placed, emphasis on placed upright, near a largest hole in the ground. Tongue has been ripped out, eyelids gone, and eyes been popped. Her cheeks and neck look chewed on, maggots crawling around the wounds. Virtuous humor dry and crusty running down one cheek. Seen dead animals and scavenging before. This trumps all in my book. Plus, I love that horse, so this is disturbing on a number of levels. Hear squealing sound behind me, break my shorts. It's neighbor Frank. He asks why I look so pale. Tell him coyotes dug her up, the horse. Bullshit. I dug that grave at least 7 feet deep. He nods and leaves with backhoe. I play car shuffle again to get him back to his truck. Get home, carefully tip Empress's head back down the grave with a shovel and rebury her. Go into the garage, slop some coyote urine around grave to keep the fuckers away. It pays to have a family as into hunting as mine. Fast forward to that afternoon. Head out on a four-wheeler with a few targets, my SIG and my moist nugget, trashy, yes, cheap, also yes, for a little sight calibration. Go to set up targets. Realize I didn't bring anything to actually set them up on. Punch self. Go into trees to grab some sticks. As I approach, get the same feeling as the day before. Go into trees, grab some suitable sticks, and do the nope scoot back to my sight. Whittle sticks into stakes, makeshift a few targets into the side of the berm, get my SIG calibrated to within acceptable parameters, and operate on the clean target for a few minutes with a nugget. After a while, I realize it's getting dark. Is the beer there any good? Believe it or not, I wasn't really into underage drinking, and that was just a comment by somebody, so yeah, I just read that. And then continuing on to the story. Decide to take targets and shit down, clean up my brass, and head back. Leave no trace. As I'm taking the targets down, the afternoon breeze shifts and suddenly stank. Hear movement from other side of berm and nearly nope a small but sturdy wall in my pants. Decide not to be a pussy, grab my SIG, and climb the berm to have a little peek. See medium-sized black shape huddled down in the trench. Aren't you cute? .jpg. Figure it's a black bear cub or something. They're more common than most folks realize, and back away slowly in case mama's nearby. Clumsily, handedly, accidentally a shower of dirt onto the cub. It looks up at me. There's no cub. Let me just say that while I'm not the original badass, creepy, or spooky images, and shit don't frighten me that easily. Shit, when I was little, one of my favorite pets was Delightful, an older Welsh pony with no eyes. Her eye holes were, in fact, sewn over and sunken in. She made one of my friends cry just by looking at him. That being said, This thing was on a completely other level, spectrum, instead of physics that from that sweet old pony. Best way I can describe it is comparing it to Pick related. Jaw was a bit thinner, eyes were beadier and darker, and the nose was more sunken back, but the rest of the details were pretty close. Same drooly mouth, same slack-jawed grin, same snarkly-ass teeth. At this point, my brain made an executive order to re-examine my previous decisions. Fuck the targets, fuck the brass, fuck the scouts, fuck not being a pussy, and fuck slow going. I tactically went back to my ATV, spent 0.00001 of a second making sure my guns are stowed securely, and gunned that shit back to the garage. Once inside with a good 8 acres between me and the fuck beast of Peculiar, I realized that I have a sworn duty to protect my farm. I already let one of my charges die under my watch. It's time to nut up or shut up. Cue arming sequence.avi. Grab my dad's tack vest, have to clinch it tight, and his Night Owl 5X. Load up 3 20-round AR-15 mags loaded with 5.56 NATO. Slap the third into my SIG and sling my new gun over my shoulder. My Nugget Tate's mag, so I put one in with 5 to spare on my vest and shoulder that bad boy. Fuck me, I even slipped a knife into my boot. There are floodlights strung up around the farm for entertaining our night work. Switches are in the garage and balcony. Go for high ground. I tactically thought the house to the balcony and got ready for war. Not a moment too soon, start hearing squawks and gurgles, and I still get the gibbles to say this, laughter coming from the chicken pen. Fuck this. I slam every switch and light up the farmyard like Rockefeller Square on Christmas. There it is, standing in the pen like Pick related. Its body was shaped like a fucking koosh ball, all matte black fur. Arms and legs were thin, but looked powerful and wiry. It was holding one of the hens with its head torn off and staring straight at me. It was obviously a male of whatever the fuck species it was, and there was fucking blood hanging off its shitty beast cock. I unslung my SIG and mag dumped, not worrying about hitting anything, trying to hit that black cotton ball of stilts. I remember thinking, I hope I blow your shitty cock off, you piece of slime. Yes, the words my brain used were piece of slime. I scored at least 5 or 6 good thwucks, my target being only about 50 yards down range. It never moved the entire time, puffs of fur flying off of it. I ejected the mag, slapped a new one in, and took aim again. I'll never forget the look it gave me, framed by that green sight. It almost said, "Are you done?" I squeezed off a final shot at its fucking mouth. I hit it. I fucking know I hit it. I remember it almost in slow motion, the puff of fucking saliva and shit as my 5.56 NATO round introduced itself to the face at 3,000 feet per second. The thing started wheezing, like a rusty gate being swung back and forth. That kind of sound. It dropped the hen and stepped over the chicken fence. I swear to fuck that this thing has either retractable legs or its body is mostly puffy fur, because when it stepped over the fence, that leg almost disappeared. I wasn't going to let it get run away. Mag dump 2, the re-dumpening. I didn't score any hits though. Once it was over the fence, it dropped to all fours and scuttled off like some giant spider back to the crack in Satan's crouch, all while wheezing that noise. I stayed up all that night, waiting for it to come back. Fed the animals with my SIG over my shoulder, went to sleep, repeated the process until my parents came home. Never saw the chicken fucking shit weasel again. So, what's your take? Well, I guess I should go ahead. A few months ago, I was watching television in my living room when I heard the first howl. It reverberated through my bones like something from my darkest nightmares, leaving me temporarily immobile with the shock of it. After a few moments, I tried my best to regain my composure, reassuring myself with a forced laugh of self-depreciation that it was most likely just a stray dog or coyote. I told myself that it had just startled me with its suddenness. Nothing more. After all, I reasoned with myself. The mind likes to exaggerate things. The rest of the night passed without further events, and I went to sleep having all but forgotten. My dreams, however, were less forgiving. In them, I stumbled through darkened woods, heard echoing howls that seemed to come from every direction at once, was haunted by the feeling of piercing eyes following me at every moment. When I finally woke a short while before dawn, I was covered in sweat. A lingering unease clung to me until daybreak. The next few weeks were pretty uneventful. Rarely I would, on occasion, hear some strange sounds as if someone was walking in another room or on the porch, but nothing that I wasn't able to simply shrug off as my imagination. The worst thing that happened was a reoccurring dream similar to the first I'd had. I'd find myself walking down a dark stretch of country road located near my home at night. The dirt road stretched out in front of me, seemingly for an eternity, while the trees on either side formed a dense canopy that only allowed for a few stray shafts of moonlight to illuminate my way. As I walked onward, I would always hear movement to either side, just out of sight. I remember only on rare occasions catching a brief glimpse of silhouettes in the dark, but always, I could feel eyes on me. Aside from the occasional dreams, it was about a full month from the first night before I heard the howling again. This time, it was not singular, but a series of overlapping howls that gathered to form a melancholy crescendo. It seemed like the howls came from every direction at once and with such piercing clarity that I could have sworn the sources were almost on top of me. I was horrified. There was something that just felt fundamentally wrong about these howls. I covered my ears and closed my eyes, trying to will away the horrendous cacophony. I truly felt like I was going to be driven to pure insanity by the piercing sounds of it all. As embarrassing as it may be, I was in the fetal position rocking back and forth with my arms over my ears when the howling finally subsided. I was trembling from fear to the point where it must have taken me a full minute to even stand. Trembling, I made a quick lap through my house, shutting all of my curtains and ensuring that my doors were locked and deadbolted, never lingering by any of the windows for long. When I finally reached the sliding glass door leading to my back porch, I heard footsteps. I was just barely able to see the black silhouettes that broke up the faint glow of the moon on my porch. If I'd had the lights on in my room, I probably wouldn't have even noticed until I was only inches away. Slowly, I reached into my pocket and pulled out my cell phone, all the while aware of the distinct sensation of their eyes upon me. I took one quick picture as my hands trembled, then slowly backed away, unable to stop gazing into those eyes, which burned like the coals of hell itself. Eventually, I inched back enough to duck into my hallway, sliding to the floor as fear took hold and drained the strength from my legs. With my back pressed to the wall, I fumbled for the hall light switch, part of me expecting to hear the telltale sound of breaking glass at any moment. Nothing. No glass breaking. No footsteps on the porch. Absolute silence filled the air. Not even the chirping of crickets reached my ears. Pulling out my cell phone and staring at the screen, not even daring to look at the picture I'd taken, my hands shook as I tried to figure out who to call. Who could I call? Ghostbusters? I whispered aloud to myself after a moment, trying to force myself to calm down with a bad joke. The cracked mockery of my voice that came out of my mouth only served to solidify my fear. I remember thinking about what I had just seen. Could I really call my friend, family member, or even the authorities? Even worse, the gate to the driveway was almost half a mile away, and I'd have to go to my car and drive the distance to let anyone in. In the end, I crept to the overside of the hall, cautiously entering my room and retrieving my CZ-52 pistol. I sure as hell wasn't going to look for a fight, but I decided that I wasn't about to die without one either. I ended up sitting there against the wall until morning, only mustering the strength to lean around the corner and look out the sliding glass door when the room was bright from the sun's rays. The porch was empty. With gun in hand, I made a few laps around the house, feeling slightly more confident with the comfort of the sun. The area was clear. I didn't even find any tracks. Over the next few weeks, I was haunted by the same dreams of being stalked as before. I could see the silhouetted figures more clearly in the trees now, as if they were getting closer. I could see the redness of their eyes reflecting in the pale light of the moon. They never howled in my dreams. They barely even made a sound as they crept along and shadowed my movements. A call to animal control revealed little except that a few people reported hearing howls as well. They said that it was normal of coyotes and that the light had played tricks on me. Unconvinced, I made a habit of locking and bolting my doors as soon as I got inside and was always indoors by dusk, with my sidearm always at the ready. I used the internet to try and figure out what could have been going on. I poured through information about candai, Canis lupus familiaris, Canis lantras. I researched all of them. What I saw did seem like a wolf or coyote, but those eyes, those howls, they were just so unnatural and unnerving that I couldn't accept this. Then there was the picture. That blurry picture from my cell phone that showed what I could only pray was a trick of the light. It was as if only the creature exuded tiny tendrils made of shadow that writhed in the air around them. I could only hope that they were diseased or covered in wet and knotted hair. A part of me knew there wasn't such a clear-cut and simple explanation to this, however. Despite wanting to remain skeptical, what I had seen and heard led me to suspect there was something unnatural and supernatural about these things. Searches led to stories of barguests and black shuck, mythical black dogs that are said to roam the English countryside as harbingers of death. I hated to even imagine this as a possibility, that my own death was just slowly stalking me until the time was right, that my end was near. Trying to allay my fears, I posted the picture I'd taken on various forums, ranging from ones about wolves and wild dogs to those dedicated to the occult and supernatural. It seemed that every time I told my story, I was either met with ridicule or nutjobs who linked it all to ludicrous things like alien plots. I caught a few leads eventually in news reports. Stories started popping up from nearby towns of people committing S-word or being attacked by wild animals. People who had reportedly heard sounds much like I had. The sites were spread apart and seemingly randomized, but I kept up my search for similar incidents. I had to find something that would prove to myself that I wasn't simply losing my mind. Sadly, all I could do was keep searching and hope to eventually find some sort of meaning to it all. Finally, 4 nights ago, my dream changed. After walking for so long, I could finally see the end of the road. I was horrified. A few hundred feet in front of me, the road simply stopped, vanishing into a wall of trees. In shock, I stood there, staring at the throng of old pines, wondering if I should turn back. I had scarcely a moment to think before I saw it. Out of the center of the mass of trees plodded a large, black, wolf-like creature, barely more than a shadow. Its eyes pierced the darkness as it eyed me. Behind those eyes was an unmistakable malice. Even more frightening, there was an unmistakable intelligence in them. I was frozen. After what seemed like an eternity, the beast sprinted at me. As the distance closed, I could see its body clearly covered in flowing black tendrils that flowed in the air as if its very essence was reaching out to devour all around it. Instinctively recoiling, I braced myself for the impact as it lunged at me, covering my stomach and neck to try and save myself. At the very moment in which I knew that everything was over, its haunting howl echoed through the night, and my heart was pounding in my chest as I woke up. My hand was already reflexing, gripping the pistol that I now kept under my pillow. Sitting upright, I was trying my best to catch my breath when I heard and saw it. Like a black smoke, it poured through one of the darkened corners of my room, almost seeming to suck the light from the area around it. As more and more started to creep in, I could clearly see those damned red eyes that were now dripping with blackened blood and a muzzle full of razor-sharp teeth starting to form. What happened in the next few seconds will be forever burned into my brain.
I got off only 3 shots between the time it had formed and lunged on top of me. I remember in the back of my mind, I was shocked that it even had physical form as the impact knocked me backwards onto the bed. My gun was knocked out of my hand as it pinned me and pushed its muzzle towards my throat. Its eyes were burning flashes like cigarettes in the dark, leaving bright trails as it maneuvered for a good bite. With one hand, I gripped its throat with all my strength, fighting to keep its gnashing teeth from my neck. While struggling, the putrid stench of 1,000 rotting corpses assailed my lungs as its breath washed over me. With my free hand, I groped frantically across my nightstand in a state of panic for some kind of improvised weapon. I was keenly aware of the sensation that my entire body was going numb. Those writhing tendrils of darkness seemed to permeate my very flesh. Everywhere they flowed through my body felt like it was submerged in freezing water. I had lost all sense of feeling in my arm that held the creature at bay by the time my hand touched the base of a familiar metal surface. My touch lamp blazed to light. In an instant, the snarling atrocity which lumbered over me seemed to fade from existence. Nearby, I heard a loathsome howl that echoed through my ears like a curse, then dissipated into nothingness. It took hours for me to regain feeling in my arm and my body, but I laid there until morning in complete and utter terror. Had the light driven it back? Was pure luck the only reason I was now alive? I could scarcely believe that it wasn't all some sort of hallucination. I wish that it had been something as merciful as insanity. In bed, I remember pondering my situation, trying to put some sense to this all. 3 shell casings laid strewn across the floor, and there were no holes in my wall. I wasn't sure how to feel about that. It told me a few things, however. There was no blood, but that beast had been hit and I was able to touch it. The sudden bright light seemed to have driven it back, but I had heard it later, so I doubted that it was fatal. It had appeared out of the darkest corner, so it possibly needed to manifest in darkness. Oh yeah, it also stalked me in my fucking dreams and toyed with me, only to then follow me into my bedroom and try to rip my throat out. I had no clue what the hell it was. I felt like I would never know what was going on. I started leaving all my lights on all night and switched all of my bulbs to 100 watts. Saving power isn't exactly high on my list of priorities anymore. I've tried staying awake forever, didn't turn out too well, but I can't remember what I dreamed of those past few nights. That's something I really don't find myself regretting. I've heard it nightly, outside, howling, walking around on my porch. I don't think anyone can ever become accustomed to that accursed howling, but it doesn't completely paralyze me with fear anymore. It may not have been much progress, but it is something. Last night, I had a bit of a breakthrough, although it doesn't really help my current situation. I'd long assumed there wasn't any chance of actually getting a serious response in any of the forums I had visited and given bits of my story to. But last night, I received an email from an alleged government worker. It seems I'm not the only one with first-hand encounters. He has been dogged, if you forgive the pun, by these same beasts for some time now as well, but unlike myself, he was able to dig up some information from classified documents that I would have never been able to get into. At first, I was extremely skeptical, until I began to read through the information he had sent me. Too many pieces fit into place for it to be sheer coincidence or him making things up. Although it is a lot of data to process, I'll relay the story as it was told to me. Over the past few decades, dogs have been the focal point of myriad of scientific experiments. Soviet scientists, for example, used them extensively in their experiments, from studies of the effects of weightlessness on the body to attempts to preserve living organs outside the body. Some died in orbit as the first animals to ever travel into the blackness of space. Countless others died deep in underground labs under the surgeon's knife in countries around the world. Not all of them, however, remain dead. Dr. Peter Safar, the inventor of CPR, introduced a concept to the army that must have seemed laughable at the time. He suggested that you could keep a body in suspended animation for hours by replacing all the blood in a body with an ice-cold saline solution. It was shelved for nearly 2 decades. But again, eventually dogs were put on the chopping block in the name of science. Organs were torn and bones were broken, only to be repaired by the ones who did the damage. The saline was drained after hours of operation. Blood was reinserted into the corpses, and their hearts were jump-started. Safar was right. You could keep a patient in stasis for hours until they could be operated on, then resurrected. It was an astounding medical breakthrough, one that would soon be twisted into a blasphemous mockery of its original purpose. Despite many practical applications for saving trauma patients and wounded soldiers, this treatment is still not in widespread use, at least not as originally intended. The government decided to do what it has always done with new technology designed to benefit mankind. The decision was made to weaponize it. Once more, due to repeated successful reanimations, man's best friend was placed firmly in scientists' sights once more. Thus began the project, henceforth known as Kerberos Project. Whoever gave it this moniker likely thought it was extremely clever. If only they had known just how fitting their choice was. It was surmised that, while in this state of suspended animation, procedures which would almost certainly kill a living creature from shock could be carried out with significantly reduced risk. In this vein, the original plan was to test concepts on the canines, which would then be carried over to select active special forces troops if successful. One of the primary goals was to make physiological enhancements that would make the test subjects much more resilient in combat. Wolf dogs were selected as prime test subjects due to their oofed larger and sturdier frames that resulted from crossbreeding. The first test subjects were put under the aim of implanting subcutaneous body armor in the form of layered titanium plates, which would theoretically be able to deflect bullets. While many were able to survive this procedure, the scientists were completely unable to find an acceptable balance between weight and protection. Results varied from dogs who could not move under their own weight, which were slightly resilient to small caliber rounds, to dogs which were highly mobile, but statistically no more likely to survive small arms fire than a dog without the augmentations. Many subjects were lost to suffocation through their own weight, while the lightly armored dogs were simply put under, yet again, their armor removed. Eventually, the solution was to found it in sheets of carbon nanotubes, woven into a lightweight fabric that was both flexible and able to resist small arms fire. The resulting armor was a mere 0.6 millimeters thick and capable of flexing freely. An astounding 70% ratio of tested dogs survived the procedure and showed an astounding resistance to small caliber handgun and rifle rounds. Having proven the plausibility of a bulletproof super soldier, they began to focus on potential offensive enhancements to the animals. Again and again, the dogs were put into a suspended state and operated on. No real breakthroughs were to occur, however. Notions such as replacing claws and fangs with much sturdier and sharper materials resulted in the animals shredding themselves into grisly ribbons when they attempted to scratch themselves. It was in this period, however, that abnormalities started to make themselves clear. The wolf dogs that had been under the knife the most started to show signs of instability. They ran into the walls as if chasing an unseen foe. They snarled and growled at vacant corners. It seemed that prolonged and repeated death and reanimation has resulted, unavoidably, in brain damage. The decision was made to continue the studies and to see just how many times the dogs could withstand the process before they were unable to fully function. The symptoms became worse and worse. The dogs seemed to stare at things that were not there. Their ears began to twitch as if listening to sounds unheard, and speculation arose that the animals had begun to hallucinate as a side effect of brain damage. But the tests were not interrupted. In time, every single of the surviving dogs displayed erratic behavior to some degree. The ones that had been subjected to the most experiments had started to even show signs of a weakening vascular system. Their heart rate slowed to an almost death-defying pace, and their eyes began to fill with red as if all their capillaries had burst. Extreme cases began to develop where blood actually started to slowly pour from the eyes and nose of the animals. These cases were accompanied by an inexplicable darkening of the fur and behavior that, if applied to a human, would be classified as paranoid schizotypical behavior. Both fear and aggression were markedly increased. The dogs alternatively slunk from and or bit at anything around them, be it real or imagined. The order came down from the high brass that these red-eyed beasts were too unpredictable for practical applications or to even continue research on. Research was confined to an observation-only basis. Within a week, the first reports of howling on the base began. Dogs began to disappear from their cages, each time with no trace as to how they even escaped. All of the cages found empty had been magnetically locked, and there were no records that indicated loss of power. With each night, reports of strange howling grew as the numbers of subjects inside the lab dwindled. Sightings of black wolf silhouettes were reported by the guards, often seen vanishing around a corner to never be located again. The corpses started turning up on the fifth morning. 12 dead. In the nearest town, people were found dead in their beds, at their computers, and on their couches. Some had their throats ripped open. Others had their entrails devoured entirely. This was easily attributed to the escaped animals, but the most puzzling thing is that a few of the homes had been locked without any signs of forced entry. Frightened townspeople recounted hearing anonymous howling throughout the night that seemed to be coming from every direction at once. Some even reported witnessing strange movements in the shadows and claimed to have been stalked by creatures by dark, red, iridescent eyes. Within 16 days, all the remaining animals, totaling over 200, had inexplicably vanished from their cages. During this period, the omnidirectional nightly howling that pervaded the nearby countryside pushed people to their mental limits. Local police were inundated with calls from panicked individuals who had locked themselves in their homes, afraid to turn out their lights or even sleep until morning. It wasn't until the end of the third week that the death toll began to wane into nothingness. Reports of the eerie howling started to be confined to the most rural of homes before they stopped entirely. The total of missing and dead was tallied at 97, with 18 deaths attributed to S-word. Of the S-words, 4 were notable for happening in the victims' beds and for a complete lack of physical trauma or traces of known drugs or medications in their bloodstreams. In the end, non-disclosure agreements were signed by staff. The government wiped its hands of responsibility and claimed the incidents in town were due to a massive rabies outbreak. All data was classified as top secret and then filed away. This is basically the meat of the information he gave me. As far as I can gather from our correspondence, this happened originally in a remote location in Arizona, which was blacked out of the files. Given my location of rural South Carolina and the fact that I have only witnessed a few at most, I could only assume that most of these animals have branched off into small packs and been roaming ever since. Sadly, I can't do anything but speculate on the details of what really happened based on what I've seen. The conclusions I've drawn only serve to horrify me even more, but I can't think of any better explanations. These dogs were taken into the realm of death dozens of times, only to be ripped back into our world. What if, each time, they took a part of the realm of death itself back with them? It's as if they began to see and feel that which exists on both sides of the veil of death simultaneously, and it cracked their minds. They underwent this turbulent transformation into some sort of semi-physical manifestation of the other side, becoming literal avatars of death. Now, this transformation is complete, and they aren't broken-minded killers anymore, but stalking agents of the afterlife that like to toy with their victims before taking them down. At will, it seems that they can manifest out of the blackness and travel the void between both worlds, somehow neither truly alive or dead, but something in between. I don't know if they can be killed, but the light holds them at bay. Earlier, I gathered all of my courage when I heard my demonic stalker on the porch and confirmed this theory. I slowly opened the back door after I'd flooded the room with light. I locked eyes with the beast. He simply glared with hatred through the glass door. He made no attempt to press forward through the light. It was a horrific few moments, but I had to be sure that the light could have offered some protection. I now feel like a prisoner of my own home, but at least I'm alive for as long as I have power. One fear keeps repeating itself in my mind, though. What happened to the 4 reported dead in their bed with no explanations why? Did they reach the end of the same road that I did and simply never wake up? They're out there. They're hunting. The only advice I can offer is to keep your lights on and try not to dream.